8 o'clock. We'll go ahead and get started. We carried over Senate File 61 from last time on the charter schools for the purpose of amendments. And Senator Ruffus, you were working up an amendment, and I see we have it in front of us. If you could explain what it does and how it fixes things.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, we had a couple of concerns based on the discussion yesterday, and so there's two things effectively that this amendment does. The first, as you see the amendment on lines 6 through 12, go to page 2, line 4, and it adds some new language to the A paragraph. So the A paragraph as structured right now says any charter school authorized to operate under this article may act as a local education agency to apply for, etc. So that would allow then any charter school, which means existing charter schools, may act as an LEA if they choose to, or they may continue to exist as they do now, where the school district is the LEA, and that would be by agreement between the school district and the charter school. Adding the new paragraph, though, clarifies that for state authorized, it's a shall. So you see the new language that we would be adding in the amendment: any charter school approved by the Wyoming Charter School Authorizing Board to operate under this article shall act as a local education agency to apply for, receive, and administer a grant through a grant program created by a federal or state statute or program. So it then creates, as we discussed, two different systems: one for the locally authorized charter schools, where that is a may.
So they in the district can
Yep,
agree.
they can make the choice between them and the district on how that wants to go. But for a state authorized charter school, it's a shall, so they shall be an LEA, which I believe was the initial intent, and stays consistent with how the statute needs to be. At that point, just to clear up the conversation we had last time, now we do not need to remove the repealer, so you won't see that in here based on this construct. The repealer remains because the language will now be inserted as this new paragraph instead of relying on the language of the repealer. So we don't need to get rid of the repealer. It's appropriate to have it repealed. And then you see page 2, line 6 and line 7. This is cleanup, where you have either electing or authorized, and to make sure that it applies for all as necessary. It says for charter schools authorized to operate as a local education agency. That then covers both the language of local and state authorized, because either they're authorized or not. And same thing, or excuse me, deleting as authorized in the next line. So makes it so that it applies to all. And then the final two changes were actually just the suggestions of the State Department of Education put into this amendment too. So you can see that lines 18 through 22 of the budget amendment are a separate issue. And this gets to the requests of, on page 3, line 9, after schedule. This is, or in accordance with an alternative schedule, or terms is inserted. That was the request, that it might not just be schedule agreed to, but other terms agreed to between the school district and the charter school. That was the request of WDE. And then adding some additional clarifying language after charter school, adding as incorporated in an agreement pursuant to Wyoming statutes. So this means that for a case of a locally authorized charter school, where there's an agreement between the school district and the charter school, the schedule or terms would be agreed to through that agreement. So there'd be a written agreement to it, as opposed to just some verbal, and that was clarification to ensure that we knew how that agreement was made. That's the amendment.
Okay. Do you move the amendment?
Yes, I move the amendment.
Okay, I know we closed public testimony, but I'd like to ask the State Department of Education and Carrie Klein, the charter school representative, do you guys see any problems with this amendment?
Mr. Chairman, committee members, Dickie Shaner, Department of Education. No problems with the amendment. Thank you. I do want to clarify to Senator Rothfuss, I don't think it was the department that made the request on the terms language, but no problem with it. Thank you.
Carrie?
We're fine, thank you, Mr.
Okay, thank you. Committee, you've heard the amendment. Any questions, discussion? Seeing none, amendment is moved. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carried. Anything further on the bill? Anything further on the bill? We have a due pass motion on the bill, I believe. Go ahead and call the roll.
Mr. Chairman, for Senate File 61, Education Charter School Amendments. Senator Beitman.
Aye.
Senator Brennan.
Aye.
Senator Rothfuss.
Aye.
Senator Steinmetz.
Excused.
Chairman Scott.
Aye.
4 aye, 1 excused.
Okay, now hold that open and see if you can get Senator Steinmetz' vote. She's going to be unable to be with us today in the audience. The reason is that there's an ag committee having a meeting and she has to be there. So we apologize on her behalf, but happens in this place. You get required to be in 2 places at once. And she's chairman of ag, so she had to be there. So we'll hold all these open for her vote. But this one is going to the floor. Okay, thank you. The next bill we have is the Summer Vacation Preservation Act. Senator Brennan, it's yours. Tell us what it's all about.
All right, excuse me. This is Senate File 82, Summer Vacation Preservation Act. What this bill would do is it's a fantastic bill for.
That?
Yeah, we've had trouble with this microphone right along in all the committees that meet here. So thank you, Senator Rothfuss.
What this bill does is it gives summer vacation back to our teachers and our students. We've done this by taking our mandatory number of school days from 175 down to 165, mandatory number of teacher in-service days from 10 down to 5, and then asking the schools to run their school year from Labor Day to Memorial Day so that kids and students, teachers can have Memorial Day to Labor Day off for their summer vacation. We also have provisions in here should a school district want to do an alternative schedule. They still are able to do that alternative schedule. They could run year round if they wanted to per a alternative schedule. And that's the gist of the bill.
Okay. Okay. Who wants to speak to this bill? The State Department, you're going to pass on it. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Tate Mullen. I'm the Government Relations Director for the Wyoming Education Association. I appreciate the bringer of this bill and the intent behind this bill. It did raise some questions. We don't take a position on this bill, but I was curious what the committee's thoughts are in terms of what this might do in terms of workload. If you think about any job that you've ever had, you're required to get tasks X, Y, and Z done in a certain amount of time. And then when you reduce that window and are still required to get that same amount of work done, given what our teachers are enduring in terms of their workload currently, does this potentially have the implications of negatively impacting them? Just a question and a consideration for the committee, and I stand for any questions.
Committee, any questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Office.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to briefly address that concern, and I think it's a valid concern, but the intent here is that with the simultaneous decrease in the total number of standards and providing some more flexibility in the standards, that's going on, and I think that's been very successful. The hope is to get to the point where that workload is actually diminished, and that this is a genuine reprieve from the required amount of work as part of that, as opposed to just try and do all of the same number of things in the same period of time. And it gets to an idea and a recognition that since the Wyoming Accountability and Education Act, there has been a tremendous burden on teachers and students that has honestly been effective, but not necessarily effective in a good way always, right? Our test scores improved. It did what it was supposed to do, but it did so at the cost of mental health and joy of learning and joy of educational experience. And so we've heard a lot of feedback appropriately from both students and teachers that there isn't as much joy in education. The hope is that legislation that starts to ease the pressure on that can return that joy so that that's the focus of the educational process. And more summer vacation, more time off, more time to relax is, I think, something that's going to contribute to that. That gives more time for our valued teachers to decompress in the summer, more time for them to relax, more time for our students to enjoy that summer as well. And so that's the intent of this. And honestly, from my perspective, if there's more we can do to ease that pressure, I'm certainly interested in finding those ways, maybe not through this bill, but there's a lot more work that needs to be done to find that right place where we're simultaneously having very rigorous, high-level standards that serve our students well and serve our teachers well, but at the same time, find a system and a process where the pressure does not lead to a diminution of that joy of learning. So we appreciate that concern. I appreciate that concern and take it very seriously.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, I appreciate the response. And again, I do want to thank the bringer of this bill. I really do appreciate the intent. It's nice to see bills where we're actually working to better the working conditions of our educators and providing a good learning environment for our students. So thank you all very much.
Thank you. As I think about this bill, it's achieving its purpose by shortening the school year and having less time that the student is in class. And our education, if anything, is getting more complex as our world gets more complex. And our education is certainly getting more important as our world gets more complex. If we want to achieve this and have a better summer vacation, is this the way to do it? Or should we eliminate some of the days off that the kids get within the school year and do it that way? And I don't know what you've heard from your members. I would certainly be interested to hear what those with practical experience in the classroom think is reducing the number of days going to materially harm the efforts that we're trying to make to get all of them well educated and successful, because this modern economy we're going into is just plain going to require more education rather than less. So I have that, and for others planning to testify, I'd be interested in your opinions on this particular feature of the bill.
Chairman Scott, I think you raise a good question, and I think that this would allow for, right, this is a conversation I'd had with a number of folks. Does this mean then that if we're going to reduce those days, do districts potentially look at keeping that schedule but reducing the number of vacation days, whether that's a spring break? There are important catch-up periods for our educators. Spring break is one of them. A number of those days that our educators are viewed to have off, they're actually working on lesson planning, catching up on grading, professional development. The short answer to that is I'm not certain if this is the best way to achieve this. It's certainly a way to achieve that goal. There might be some valuable comment from educators in the room about what that might look for them specifically. I just know that I have heard from membership that there is concern about the workload piece in terms of the time frame.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Quick note on your question. This changes the minimum number of days, but leaves flexibility to the districts and how they want to implement it. Other states have, in fact, Colorado, I believe, has a minimum number of days of 160, but most of their districts do more days than that, right? They design their calendar around what looks like a good calendar, but they have flexibility. And so there's nothing here that says you can't go more than that 165 days. And if the best schedule based on when the dates fall on a given year ends up being a 171 day schedule so that you've got a good spring break and still meet the end dates, that's perfectly reasonable. The concern was it would have been a very challenging piece of legislation if you just changed the dates, right? If you just said that you have to have Memorial Day and Labor Day as your hard start and stops, but there's no relief valve for planning, that would have been a challenge. So this provides a lot of flexibility to districts as written to schedule based within those two parameters. And then as Senator Brennan noted, it even provides flexibility for them to schedule outside of it pursuant to an alternative schedule. So if they have a justification, they can make the justification request. And I hope nobody is very draconian in approving those requests. If a school district has a good reason why they want to do something different, I think it's important to honor that. But setting these guideposts and trying to ensure that there's more opportunity to have and enjoy that summer break, signaling from the legislature, honestly, that this is something that is needed, I think is meaningful, right? When we signaled with the Accountability in Education Act and the rigorous standards, the districts took that and they implemented the intent of that. And I think this is a valuable way to signal back, all right, but make sure that your mental health is valued, make sure that there's sufficient time to have your summer vacation and that you don't crowd that out because you have to achieve everything else that we've been passing. So there's a lot of flexibility built into this, and I think that's appropriate to ensure that the districts can implement it in a way that is best for their districts based on their values.
Seeing no further questions, thank you. Who wants to be next? School Boards Association.
Mr. Chairman, Brian Farmer, Wyoming School Boards Association. Just wanted to say that we appreciate this discussion. I think the bill raises a lot of questions. Our primary concern is around student achievement. As we think about reduced instruction time, that becomes sort of that concern. What does it mean for kids ultimately in terms of their ability to achieve? Mr. Chairman, I think one of the concerns that we really had with this is a concern for those districts that have 4-day school weeks. So if you have a 4-day school week, how does this translate? What is the ability of the district to accommodate it? And Mr. Chairman, I think really the concern that we heard from most of our board members ultimately came down to the issue of local control. I think many folks appreciate the desire to start and stop between Labor Day and Memorial Day. Every single calendar committee in every single district starts with that and wants to do that. Of course, the hurdle then comes at the 175 days. How do you do that? Mr. Chairman, we do have some school districts that by the culture in their district take a 2-week school break, spring break. That is part of their tradition, something longer than a week, or a fall break, looking at that. And so really just that concern for local communities to be able to make the decisions on their own. But Mr. Chairman, really there are questions of how that will play out, and curious for thoughts on how that might work. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Question? Senator Bite.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Farmer, does the School Board Association have a position on this bill? Because you made it sound like they're against it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Beitman, Mr. Chairman. No, we don't have a position. We had our school board forum yesterday, and so behind me, there's quite a lot of school board members. And I just am reflecting the conversation, the discussion that we heard from them. And as I started, it raised a lot of questions for us. And so those were the questions that we heard from our members that we don't have answers to.
Follow up. Mr. Chairman, I can give you one answer to one of your questions. Talking to the parents when they see the last week of school is like a free-for-all and there's no learning going on, parents are asking themselves, why am I sending my kid to school to just, hi Shark Tank, when their kids are just playing games all week after the YTEP's over or whatever their final thing is, and they start cleaning out their lockers. A lot of parents are wondering, why can't we get on with our summer break? So there's 4 or 5 days right there that we can take off the schedule and maybe add it to after Labor Day. What are your thoughts on that?
Mr. Chairman, I think that's a great local conversation. I think that school boards should be having those conversations with parents, should be having those discussions with their teachers. And so I don't disagree that where we are finding places that we aren't being efficient with school calendars, we ought to be having that discussion at the local level.
Thank you.
Further questions? Further questions? Okay. Q? Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, Charles Oski, Superintendent Johnson County School District Number 1. So just clarification, I'm excited about this.
Yeah, Mr. Oski, that is, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Oski, that is correct. We did take down the number. The number of contact hours is in the rules from the Wyoming Department of Education. We did the math and the number of contact hours fits nicely within that 165.
Yeah, and that's just a clarification
Yeah.
for everybody is are we reducing the number of contact hours or just the number of days within that schedule? And then as an advocate for teachers, and exciting in this is I just want to be very clear when we reduce the number of days, I do not want to have the conversation down the road that we're going to reduce how we fund teachers because what we're trying to do is keep and recruit them with the number of days. So just being an advocate for that this doesn't turn into something that teachers are working less days, so they need to get paid less. We need to continue to find a way to support our teachers, and I appreciate what you're trying to do here. And I just wanted to bring some clarification to when we're trying to schedule, it's still within those contact hours. So thank you.
Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Figure out the speaker. Good morning. Scott Soltz, Superintendent of Schools in District 2. Thank you for the opportunity to share. District 2 is in Sheridan. Yeah. I will not claim that. I will share, though, I certainly appreciate the intent of the bill. I absolutely do, in taking into consideration the perspective of our teachers and our students and our staff. We get that. I would say that reducing the amount of instruction time is a concern. When we have 175 days is all that we get to work with our kids, we know the rigors and the intent of what we expect all kids to know and be able to do within that time frame. And when you waste 5 days, which I hope never happens in District 2, and I'm unfortunate that that may happen in other districts, but we time account for all 175 days, and we understand the rigor of that. We understand the rigor of what we expect all kids to know and be able to do. And yes, maybe we may see it reducing in standards, but we're not necessarily assured that the state assessment is going to reduce what we expect the kids to be able to demonstrate before the end of the year. So I think we have that concern. The other thing is that within that 175 days, we do have breaks for our teachers. So it's not just pedal to the metal for 165 days, and there's no breaks within that. We also understand that teachers need some time, students need some time, administration needs some time where there is periodic breaks throughout the school year. So that would be our concern, is A, that there's not enough instruction days to accomplish what we need to when we expect what we do, which I think is rigorous, and it should be, because those are expectations that we hold our students, our staff accountable for, and we expect those high rigor. If we reduce the number of days, I think that, again, reduces number of instruction, and I think makes it even more difficult for us to accomplish that task. But again, I appreciate the intent of the bill, but those are the concerns that we have from District 2.
Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, and thanks for sharing those concerns. A couple of questions. The first is, do you see a way that we could change this or amend this that would provide you with more confidence in terms of addressing those needs that you laid out? Because I think most of those were discussed, and the attempt was to provide the flexibility to alleviate that. One of the challenges, obviously, with a system where you want to do as well as you can is there's no question that if our students went to school 365 days a year, they would score better, right? I'm confident of that. They might be miserable, but they would score better.
Yes.
And same with the teachers, right? They'd have more contact time, they could teach better, but they too would be miserable. And this is a balance, and this is a bit of a trade-off. And maybe your district hasn't had the challenges with mental health and with teacher morale and with student morale and student mental health, but this seems like a relatively straightforward way to, if the state's telling you, hey, we want you to scale back the number of days, and that's something we value, it seems that alleviates the pressure without in any way obviating what you're saying as being true, that it may lead to less total days of education and less instruction availability. So if not this, then what? I mean, how do we accomplish that task? How do we, as the state, signal that? Obviously, we can decrease the standards, but that isn't necessarily a good thing either. We want rigorous standards. And so I don't know what we would do alternatively, and I'm looking for ideas constructively if maybe there's more we can do in addition to this. So what are your thoughts?
Chairman Scott, Senator Rothfuss, I appreciate the question, and I think that's certainly very thought-provoking as far as what could that look like. And I like I said, I do appreciate that, and I know within the bill it does allow the flexibility that if you chose to go beyond the 165 minimum days, that you could certainly request of the state board to extend your school calendar longer than that. So I do understand that. But I do have the concerns that if that becomes the standard, then it becomes that much more difficult to send that message across the state that we're going to reduce the number of days, and how do we accomplish all of that within that? But the mental health is real, and it's real in Sheridan County as it is across the state. And I think there's things that we have to do to continue to focus on that. Is it extending the summer vacation? Maybe. Is it allowing continuous breaks throughout the year to address those things so that they do get time away? and then come back more refreshed. I think that's also what we're currently trying to accomplish within the 175-day calendar that we have right now. But certainly, I will think about what are some other options that we could do to help provide those opportunities, taking into consideration exactly what this bill does. So again, I appreciate that intent. I thank you for that because it is real.
And thank you. And just to clarify, if you wanted to have more than 165 days in this bill, you wouldn't have to ask the department, or excuse me, the board. The only thing that would require permission is an alternative schedule that takes you outside of the Memorial Day, Labor Day window. So
Right.
if you can do 175 days in there, then you wouldn't have to make a special request, or maybe it's 171 one year and 173 the next. I just wanted to clarify that for those that were interested.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
Good morning. My name is Dana Wyatt, and I'm a school board trustee for Sheridan County School District Number 2, but I'm also a 40-year veteran teacher. And I just want to share, Chairman Scott, you had asked for people that worked in the field and what they would feel about this. I'm not a professional speaker, so bear with me. A few concerns for teachers and students. The breaks throughout the year are our mental health. We need those breaks to recalibrate, to spend time with our families, and do things that we need to do as human beings, such as taking care of family members, etc. For children, they look forward to the breaks as well. One of the things, though, that some of the ideas that may not have come across, there's a lot of our kids that have two sets of families, and some of those families do not live in the same town. And so very, very important for those families to be able to have their children during those holidays that the courts have allowed them to have. For instance, a 2-week break at Christmas is really important for some of those families to be able to send their kids to their other parents. Spring break as well. When those number of days are reduced, then those number of break days during the year, and then what happens to that family, situation. Summer breaks. There's so many families that both parents work. And sorry to say, but it is a financial hardship on a lot of families to pay for childcare throughout the summer. Also, there is a lot of kids that home life is not the safest place. School is a safe haven. And so those are just some things I want you to consider from an educator's point of view and someone who has taught for 40 years and just wanted to share those with you. Thank you.
Committee, any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Anybody else? Anybody else? Anybody else? Okay, we'll close public testimony. Committee, what's your pleasure? Okay, bill's been moved. Discussion. Senator Ruffus.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I think we've had a good discussion. I appreciate the input. I will say that the bill is not intending to decrease the number of days of any of the vacations, spring break, or anything along those lines. That was one of the key points about having to decrease the total number of days required to ensure that that doesn't take place. If those required days were not decreased, then you might have that. And that is certainly not the intent, because I agree that they're essential for, again, everybody's well-being and mental health throughout the school year. I would encourage everybody that is here and that's listening to think of other ideas, think of other things that we can do that target this need to improve that joy of learning and the mental health of both our educational professionals and our students. I have 4 kids. I guess I only have 3 kids in K-12 now. One of them's at UW. But this is something I see, and I see the need for it, and I see the kind of the burnout and the feeling of that it just starts to become overwhelming across the board. I see that throughout a very good educational system, right? Laramie, Albany County School District 1 is an incredible system of education, in my opinion, just unbelievable. But that's the thing that I see that I'm most worried about, honestly, is everybody having a good time at all times. And I think that's important. So more ideas, more suggestions, I think would be welcome. What can we do to improve that aspect of our educational system without diminishing the quality of education that we provide, which is extremely high? So I think it's a good move. It's a step in a positive direction, but I, again, welcome further input and hope this will be an ongoing dialogue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'll echo the sentiments of my friend over there. And I'll also add that, the people that aren't in the room right now are the people that are out running small businesses. They don't have a lobbyist. They're at work trying to keep the lights on. And they depend on high school kids to during this tourist season to run those businesses and that workforce. And when you're cutting, basically the summer is so short now, from middle of June maybe to the middle of August. And then the kids leave, or they even leave a week or 2 earlier than that because they're starting sports or whatever. The kids aren't working anymore in summertime jobs. So I'm speaking on behalf of small business owners and the tourism industry in the state of Wyoming. And I'm also speaking on behalf of the parents who don't have a lobbyist either. And this is not just my local community. I hear it from parents all over the state. I do. I truly do. And I thank the senator for bringing this bill. And we've talked about bringing this for a couple of years now, and it's needed. And I think we should move this bill forward, Mr. Chairman.
Developed some reservations about this bill. I think education is perhaps the most important thing that our state government does. And I think it's very important that we get all the children a good education. I think the modern economy is going to demand it. And the world has simply not gotten less complex. I do hear the concern about summer workforce. And I think that's a valid concern. I think it's being invaded by a number of things. Various sports programs in the summer and all kinds of things. I think it's a good experience for kids to get some actual work experience in the summer. And I'm seeing less and less of that going on. Whether this will remedy that or not, I don't know. But it does strike me that a number of the things we're trying to teach have simply gotten more complicated. And I think we shouldn't underestimate the difficulty of some of what we're asking in terms of the learning from the students. So I worry about having the fewer days. I am also almost guarantee you that somebody will say, well, if they aren't going to work as many days, we shouldn't pay them as much. Whether that point of view will prevail or not, I don't know, but I suspect you'll hear it. So that's a risk too. Are we going to be able to continue to be competitive with regard to salaries if that attitude should prevail? I view that as a risk and not a certainty. So I do have some reservations about this bill.
Mr. Chairman?
So briefly on the first reservation, one of the things that honestly we could do more effectively in the state that I think would benefit education and learning is more robust summer programming through the education system. And honestly, this provides more opportunity to do that as well. We, years ago, had specific funding through the model for a summer bridge program and for other summer educational programs, and those have gotten stripped away over the years. I think most of it went away in that large budget cut about 6 years ago, eliminated summer bridge, if I'm not mistaken. This can be used as a tool, an educational tool as well, where we have more opportunity during the summer to target specialized learning and needed learning to identify what students need support. Maybe honestly, even opportunity for summer programs as we build out our dual and concurrent enrollment. There's more opportunity for students to be taking courses through our colleges during the summer. So there is still a tremendous amount of educational opportunity if that's the desire. And I don't think this has to be detrimental. And I think our districts are clever and creative and will use the extra time that's available to plan and think of how they can make a better system with it. So I guess I don't share that concern that this is going to significantly reduce the amount of teaching that gets done and the performance of students. If that turns out to be the case, we can switch this back, to be clear, right? This isn't a one-way ticket. And if it proves that, well, wow, we sure needed those extra 5 days, why top scores dropped by 15%, we'll hear about it and probably do something about that. I'd be really surprised if that happened. I mean, I would be incredibly surprised. I bet we had a few extra weeks of joy and happiness, and I'm gonna wager that we don't end up reducing the amount that our students end up learning in school.
Okay. Anything further? There was a motion on the bill, so call the roll.
Mr. Chairman, Senate File 82, Summer Vacation Preservation Act. Senator Beitman.
Aye.
Senator Brennan.
Aye.
Senator Rothfuss.
Aye.
Senator Steinmetz is excused. Chairman Scott.
I'll vote no. Again, get Senator Steinmetz's vote. So, but that's 3 votes, the bill will come out of committee. Okay, the next bill we've got is the school finance cash reserves. I don't see the sponsor of the bill here. Can you call up to the Senate and see if they could get Senator Dockstader down here?
Yes, one moment.
Okay. debate, if we have time, we may have the same difficulty, because I know Senator Hicks is in the Ag Committee this morning on the teacher tenure bill. And if we have some time, and we can't get him up here, I'm going to just start taking testimony on the bill, so we have a chance for people to have a say on that. But that's assuming this next bill is relatively rapidly, which I think it will be. But I will tell you, in my years here, I have been surprised more times than I care to remember about how long a bill will take. It's frankly one of the more difficult things that a chairman does, is estimate how much time certain bills will take. You think it's a simple 5-minute bill and it takes an hour. You think it's going to take an hour and it takes 10 minutes. They are really unpredictable that way. Committee will come back to order. Senator Dockstader, we appreciate you coming, and we'll give you just a second, catch your breath. School Finance, Cash Reserve, Senate File 110. Proceed when you're ready.
I didn't bring that. I'm sorry, I grabbed another one because I thought that's where we're at. Thank you. Thank you. Too many committees this morning, Mr. Chairman.
And I apologize if I misled you as to which charter school bill we had this morning.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chairman, I brought this in a group of, from a group of school districts who essentially are looking for an opportunity to have better control over their funding, over their future. And at times they felt like they've been limited with that. And so in a discussion amongst many of them, they said, this is an opportunity to better control our own finances and help us better plan for the future. That's a short summary. I had a much longer summary down on another desk, but that's a short summary where we want to go with this. And I bring it to you on behalf of several districts who are looking for a solution as we delve into the multiple changes of school finance.
My understanding is that what the bill does is it simply, the reserves had been at 15, limited to 15%. And a few years ago, when the feds came in with their massive stimulus thing, we raised that to 30% to give the districts more flexibility to be sensible with that money. And what this bill does is remove the sunset date. And so that going forward, 30% would be the limitation on reserves instead of 15%. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, and retirement of the sunset date is our main focus here too. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, committee, questions? Okay. Seeing none. Thank you very much. Yeah. And we're sorry to rush you, and you have another committee going on at the same time? Yes. Okay, so we will understand if you have to depart us.
Mr. Chairman, I'll wait for just a moment. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, anybody, State Department of Ed, you want to speak to this?
Mr. Chairman, committee members, Dickie Shaner, speaking on behalf of Superintendent Degenfelder. She does support this bill, and I also wanted to add that, and I apologize for not bringing in writing, but one thing we would also suggest the committee consider is that last year there was a bill that removed the special education reimbursement from the total amount of this calculation, essentially reducing the amount of reserves that a district could have. The department or the superintendent would suggest that this committee consider allowing that special education reimbursement to be added back into the total 30% calculation. And we can provide some language to that via email if that would help.
So that was the bill that passed last year?
Correct.
Is that going to fit in the title of this bill? Senator Dockstetter? The title of the bill, enacting school finance limiting sunset date for increasing school district operating balance and cash reserves and providing an effective date. I'm not sure that dealing with the special ed situation fits the title.
Mr. Chairman, I question whether that would fit in. Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I think it's something I would agree with, but I think if we tried to do it, we might be asking for trouble. If we had a broader title, it'd be different.
Understood. Thank you.
And audience, we have a restriction, state constitutional restriction on altering a bill too much in its, from the form it was introduced in, and where you have a title that was pretty much limited to removing the sunset date, adding another piece is a potential state constitutional problem. So. Senator Biden.
Mr. Chairman, being on the receiving end of a couple substitute bills, I would argue that where there's a will, there's a way. And, yeah, I'll just leave it at that. Talk to the House Appropriations Committee.
Okay, but we're not like that.
Thank God.
It does, especially with a 20-day session, you get into a row or something like that, and you can find some difficulty. That's something we will take under advisement. Committee, do you have any further questions? State Department of Education? Seeing none. Who wants to testify next? Mr. Farmer.
Mr. Chairman, Brian Farmer, Wyoming School Boards Association. I'd like to thank Senator Dockstader for bringing this bill. It has been a long-standing discussion about the appropriateness of having adequate reserves. So we stand in support of this bill, and thank you for your consideration of this. Mr. Chairman, just briefly, a point of clarification and potentially a way that this does fit within your title. Mr. Chairman, the title says eliminating the sunset date for an increase in school district operating balances and cash reserves. If what your consideration is on page 3, line 20, you talk about the total foundation program amount computed. What the bill last year that Mr. Shaner talked about was a bill that took special education outside of the school foundation program account. Mr. Chairman, potentially if you were to say the school foundation program amount and the amount for computed for special education. That amount computed for special education also being a part of the total balance. And so you're removing a sunset on the total balance as opposed to a sunset on what the foundation program account is or used to be or was or whatever. Still a debate, still certainly subject to your consideration. But Mr. Chairman, I think the important part is this moves the limit from 15% to 30%. And Mr. Chairman, one thing I'll note in particular that does not change, one of the concerns of the legislature when we went from 15 to 30% was we don't want school districts to be using that 16 to 30% for things like capital construction. Mr. Chairman, that prohibition stays in, so that's not there. So be assured that when there is an increase in reserve, that increase in reserve is for the operation of the district. That does not change anything. The limitation that you previously provided survives. It continues as a part of percentage 16 through 30. So it is a measured measure that Senator Dockstader has proposed, and we certainly think is a good step that allows for a greater fiscal flexibility for school districts. At the end of the day, this can mean the difference between making payroll and having to take short-term loans for school districts because it can simply be a matter of cash flow. This allows them to keep money in the bank so that they can pay the bills, and then in the fall they get their tax money, and it just really allows for better operation for the district. With that, appreciate the bringer of the bill and ask for your favorable support.
Questions? Thank you very much. That is a useful suggestion to make to us. Anybody else? Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Jeremy Smith, Business Manager, Sheridan County School District Number 1. I don't pretend to speak for all business managers, but I would be very surprised if any single business manager in the state would not support this bill. So thank you for bringing it. The denominator has changed, and I think you've had some good conversation about that. So when the sunset provision, or when this statute was originally passed, special education was a calculation in that 15%. You remove that, and if we go back to the 15%, it's a far smaller number than it was before. So certainly removing the sunset is a great step. If we can also recalculate back in the special education cost component towards the calculation, even better. But simply removing the sunset date is a great option, and certainly we appreciate your consideration of that. There is the restriction for the capital construction component that Mr. Farmer indicated on percentages 16 through 30. Simply if, you know, again, if there's someone who would bring an amendment, we would like that to see that restriction removed as well. I think our locally elected school board members have a great pulse on what the appropriate level of cash reserving should be for the districts. But absent, you know, complications or making this bill more complicated than it needs to be, just removing the sunset is a great option. And we finance folks certainly appreciate that. One special education student can cost you $350,000 to $400,000 in a year. And so not having adequate reserves to handle that for the period of time until your reimbursement is a very bad cash position to be in. 30% represents about 110 days of operating. 15% is half of that. And there's times where we'll go 60 to 90 days between large cash infusions from either the county treasurer or the state entitlement payments. So it's critical that that's go to the 30% with the sunset date. There are other ways to improve the statute, but certainly time is short. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll stand for any questions.
Okay. Senator Office.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. You know, I appreciate this discussion, but getting back to the special education side, I'm just curious how this works with it being 100% reimbursement. That's the reason why it was taken out, and I understand that everyone wants to put back, but I'm kind of missing a little bit of the logic here. If it's 100% reimbursement, I don't know how you could carry a reserve that is generated from the 100% reimbursed special education.
Right. Mr. Chairman and Senator Rothfuss, we're not carrying a reserve in that kind of context. It's a reserve because the very first year that you incur those costs, that comes from your reserves.
Right.
And then obviously you're paid the next year, but you don't really get it back into your reserves until that student has left your district. And if they're a 13-year-old, it might be till they're 21, and so it might be 8 years later before that 300,000 comes back into it. I think that's the critical part, is that you are out that money for as long as you have that student until they leave your district. Maybe I didn't answer the question.
Well, Mr. Chairman, from the cash flow standpoint, I guess I don't know how you could ever get ahead and have a reserve account unless you were drawing more money away from your traditional school foundation program side. And I'm not saying this is a good system, right? I know that it causes challenges for school districts, that you're always being paid in arrears for special education. That's a challenge. That's a different challenge. I just don't know how this can functionally work well to have a reserve supporting your special education, because it seems to me that you just have to fund that out of your general school foundation program.
Mr. Chairman and Senator Rothfuss, you're correct. I mean, in order to fund a reserve, you're not spending funds given to you in the foundation guarantee that's supposed to be spent on students in that year. So that's accurate.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and you would have that circumstance all the way through, I think, so that it is a general reserve and would help you out in a special education circumstance.
Correct. Yeah, but Mr. Chairman, it's just a prudent way to manage the funds of the district, to have an adequate cash flow reserve, one, and then two, a portion of that general reserve is for those unexpected events, or, you know, the front loading of the special education cost. And so those are all reasons why we have a reserve. 15% is inadequate wholly. 30% is quite close to probably the real number. Or you could argue 5 points either way, but it's pretty darn close.
Mr. Chairman?
Senator Office.
Just as a point on that, and this might be something we could look at in the future, it might make more sense for us to contemplate a more time-sensitive funding system for the higher cost special education students, rather than having to continuously pay in arrears. But that's obviously not in the context of the bill.
Yeah. Okay. Committee? Okay, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Very useful. Anybody else? Anybody else? Seeing no further testimony. Committee, what's your pleasure?
I'll move the bill.
Move the bill. The special education, they're gradually convincing me that it is probably within the title, that it's a relatively minor adjustment, and that it is needed to include that amount in setting the reserves, because it will be used for special education purposes. Does anybody want to move the amendment that was suggested? To do just that.
Yeah, and Mr. Chairman, I'd like to see it for a committee of the whole amendment, honestly, rather than right now, and give it some more thought. And part of that is because I don't have the bill in front of me.
I think we ought to take care of it here in committee if we're going to. The amendment would be page 3, line 20. After amount, insert and the amount computed for special education purposes. And then, or of the total foundation program amount and the amount computed for special education services. And it would probably come after WS 2113-309 rather than after amount. Just to make the English work properly.
And Mr. Chairman, I think we would probably also need it on the mirror language on page 4 in the same construct. Now that portion of it is, I believe, just kind of a reporting and tracking component.
So on page 3,
Page 4,
page 4, line 3, after 309.
yeah, exactly as you did before, if you want to insert it that way.
Okay. Did you get that, Ashley?
Yes, I did, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. I'll go ahead and move that. I think we'll have better
Sure.
luck getting it done here in committee.
Sure.
Okay. Further discussion? Sponsor, are you all right with that? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That carried. Back on the bill. Any further discussion of the bill? Seeing none, call the roll, please.
Mr. Chairman, Senate File 110, School Finance Cash Reserves as amended. Senator Brightman.
Aye.
Senator Brennan.
Aye.
Senator Rothfuss.
Aye.
Senator Steinmetz will hold that vote open.
Yeah.
Chairman Scott.
Aye.
4 aye.
Mr. Chairman, committee, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate
my
you
next meeting.
sticking with us and getting it done.
Thank you for your help.
And thank you, for audience, thank you for your help on this one. The next one we've got is Senate File 95, teacher tenure. We've got about a half hour before we're going to have to quit to go upstairs. Ashley, can you call the Ag Committee? I think they're in room 2, and tell Senator Hicks we are going to hear the bill, that we would welcome his appearance, but we're going to start proceeding anyhow.
Mr. Chairman, the Senate Ag Committee Secretary messaged me and said he is already on his way.
Okay. In that case, we will wait just a minute for him. Safer to have him present it than to have me with my limited knowledge of the bill. Board members that aren't used to us, this is unfortunately a normal proceeding as we run close to deadlines, as we almost start out close to the deadlines of the budget session. We have too many demands on members to be 2 places at once. And it does make things a little more difficult. But this teacher tenure is an important bill, and I suspect a controversial one. And I want to be fair to the sponsor too. Well, we've got one more meeting left on Senate files, and I don't want to jam it up with too many bills, so. He should have been here by now. Committee, I think we'll come to order and we'll interrupt when he shows up, if he shows up. He, as the majority leader, he's subject to being shanghaied and interrupted in just getting here. So the bill is labeled teacher tenure. What it does is it removes the continuing contract status from Wyoming teacher employment law. And that requires modifying the hearing requirements. It specifies which teachers it's applicable to. It has a legislative intent section, which is unusual. That's found on the last page of the bill at section 3. And I would welcome anybody that wants to comment on this bill, recognizing we may, if the sponsor does manage to get here through all the distractions, we may ask you to interrupt your testimony and come back. So with that, Wyoming Education Association, have at it.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Tate Mullen. I'm the Government Relations Director for the Wyoming Education Association. A few prepared statements. At the K-12 level, continuing contract provisions prevent a school district from dismissing a teacher without good reason. These laws reflect deliberate legislative judgments that new teachers need time and support to develop into great teachers. Continuing contract provides employers with broad authority to dismiss teachers during their first years of employment. With continuing contract, those laws protect the investment that both the teacher and the school district have made in professional development by ensuring that experienced educators cannot be fired for poor or arbitrary reasons. Continuing contract laws provide teachers with due process, meaning the right to know why they are being dismissed and the opportunity to challenge a dismissal that a teacher believes is unfounded. Due process policies give good teachers the freedom they need to give students the best education possible. They make sure that teachers can challenge the reasoning of poor administrative decisions and advocate on behalf of their students without fear of being fired for doing what is best for their students. Educators with continuing contract can be dismissed only for specific causes outlined in state law. Those include incompetence, neglect of duty, immorality, insubordination, unsatisfactory performance, any other good or just cause. The catch-all provision allowing for dismissal for any good or just cause is worth noting. Continuing contract offers important due process protections and stability to teachers, but school boards still have considerable leeway over dismissals. The any good or just cause language is vague and broad, and this wording gives school boards substantial discretion in dismissal decisions. Other common causes give school boards discretion to determine whether conduct was immoral or unprofessional or whether school board policies were violated. If schools wish to dismiss a teacher with continuing contract, it must first provide the teacher with notice of the reason for dismissal and an opportunity for the teacher to request a hearing on the dismissal charges. A hearing can be conducted by an independent hearing officer at the teacher's request, and the school board reviews findings and recommendations and renders the decision. There is a time period within which a teacher must request the hearing, when the hearing must occur, and when the final decision must be issued. In most cases where the school board upholds a teacher's dismissal, the teacher may choose to appeal that decision. The appeal forum in Wyoming is the district court in the judicial district where the school district is located. Again, continuing contract laws provide teacher with due process, meaning the right to know why they are being dismissed, and the opportunity to challenge a dismissal that a teacher believes is unfounded. Now that we know what continuing contract is, let's review what it is not. Continuing contract does not require continuing employment of an incompetent teacher. Continuing contract does not facilitate the retention of incompetent teachers. Continuing contract is not a guarantee of a lifetime job. It means that teachers have basic rights, most importantly, the right to due process when they and their families' livelihoods and financial stability are threatened. There are implications, significant implications for attraction and retention with this proposed bill. The issue of educator attraction and retention is one of the most salient issues in education policy in Wyoming. This policy will have substantial negative consequences for our district's ability to recruit and retain. The reality regarding continuing contract is that district's biggest problem isn't removing bad teachers, but rather attracting and retaining those we so desperately need. Our teachers are doing yeoman's work under increasingly difficult conditions, as you have heard over the past few years. If we really want to improve education, we must do so by improving working conditions, not making them worse, and by making teaching in our schools more attractive and supporting those teachers to help them improve their craft. I strongly urge a no vote on this bill. With that, I'll stand for any questions.
Interpreting your testimony, you're again the bill?
Senator Scott, no, we are definitely against the bill.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Grady Hutcherson, a proud second grade teacher from Torrington, Wyoming of 24 years, and I now proudly serve as the president of the Wyoming Education Association. You had shared at your first committee meeting that you appreciate short testimony and being blunt. So I am going to share a couple of things and keep it short. I appreciated the conversation you all were having earlier this morning about trying to figure out ways to support our amazing educators in the state of Wyoming. You all set the tone at the top, and that's important, but actions also speak louder than words. Removing teacher tenure, removing the teacher continuing contract status does not support teachers in the state of Wyoming. A vote to support this bill is a vote against teachers in the state of Wyoming. I also will raise one question. There's language in the bill related to being suspended without pay. As a classroom teacher of 24 years, all it would have taken is an accusation, and I could have potentially been suspended. Now the statute reads without pay, then it goes through the process. If that accusation or allegation were found to be false, I don't understand from this bill if I then would be entitled to be recompensated while the investigation was done, so I raise that as a question. But I encourage a no vote on this bill that is against teachers in the state of Wyoming. Thank you, and I would stand for questions.
Okay. Committee questions for either of those two? While they're thinking for a moment, let me ask you, where in the bill is that particular provision that you were just citing?
Chairman Scott, when I look at page 11, paragraph M, it talks about the hearing and being retained. It's that paragraph where potentially an individual teacher would be found that their employment would be retained, but it doesn't address the fact that they could have been on suspension without pay. So I was unable to determine in the bill what happens in that scenario.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Committee, Senator Office.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know one of the things that drives legislation like this is a belief that teachers that are not effective never leave teaching, and that there aren't any remedies. And I think it's important to contemplate that. Is this what has been the experience, or have districts been able to remove teachers that have been chronically ineffective, or provide opportunities for professional development for those teachers that need additional professional development? Can you provide some insight into the real track record on the ground for the state of Wyoming?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, again, going through the language of what allows a district to dismiss an educator, that language is broad enough that it does allow districts to remove incompetent or poor teachers. We have seen very few cases go to that hearing process, because what we have seen is that is handled within that district. For some cases, there are opportunities for remedy, a decision with administrators, the teacher, their potential WA representative. We aren't seeing this huge influx of cases of, we're seeing all these bad teachers and requests for dismissal or termination. The process that we have in place works, and it works on the behalf of not only districts, but our teachers and our students as well. I hope that answers any questions. President Hutcherson might have some additional comment.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, just to reiterate, the system we have does work. Administration has the opportunity to evaluate teachers that are on continuing contract status. If there is an issue or a problem, that teacher on continuing contract status has an opportunity to grow and improve and correct it, or then there's the move for dismissal. So I just want to reiterate, this idea of tenure, an automatic job forever, is false. The current system allows for the procedure to remove teachers. Thank you.
And this bill hasn't been introduced in terms of actually giving us the opportunity to talk to the legislators that are bringing it forward, but it looks similar to Senate File 52 from 2011 in terms of how it implements a removal of continuing contract. And I recall at that time a lot of discussion about what the implications would be of a bill like this, and that was really why Senate File 52 failed, was the impact that it would have on the education system in the state of Wyoming, because we would lose the best teachers. I think that was a lot of the testimony. And that under the current system, the teachers that are the worst teachers and need to go are able to go, but without continuing contract, I recall testimony that the best teachers would be the other ones that would go, actually, because they're the ones that end up butting heads with administrators and being vocal about advocating for students, and it ends up being those teachers that become the inconvenient ones. So is that the type of experience we could expect, is to probably lose our best teachers in the state of Wyoming to other states that are more respectful of their teaching?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, absolutely. I will just share from my experience, 24 years in the classroom, that continuing contract status allowed me to not have to fear exactly what you were talking about. It also provided that stability. And if I don't have that in Wyoming, and if I don't know that I'm just randomly now not going to be offered a contract, I would consider relocating to a place where I knew I had that stability for myself and my family. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, and to follow up on President Hutcherson's point, every state around us that draws our teachers away currently, given our teacher shortage, does have continuing contract status.
Is it universal in the United States?
Chairman Scott, it is not universal in the United States. There are 4 states, I believe, that have done away with continuing contract status as of 2023. And there are other states that have, I think there's a handful of them, I want to say 6 or 7, that have varying degrees, varying language within their continuing contract status. But the vast majority of states, and most importantly, those surrounding us, all have continuing contract status.
Okay. Committee? Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Seeing no sponsor, we're going to proceed with other testimony. Who wants to be next? Mr. Winnie.
Mr. Chairman, Bill Winnie, on the performance, ACT scores, where do students go to college, where do students go to trade schools, how do your students do that go to the service academies perform, and those kind of things. And that ought to be where your focus is, but the real mechanics ends up being on money, and I got it. The question you have to ask as you look at the bill like this is, what do you want teachers focused on? Do you want them looking over their shoulder, wondering what the administration wants them to be doing? Or do you want them doing the best they can as a teacher, being as skilled and knowledgeable in their field? I saw an instructional facilitator brought in because the school district had declining ACT scores. During the term of this instructional facilitator, the performance of the ACT scores in that district went up 8%. So where do you want those teachers focused? There's a tendency, in my observation, as I stand back from the system, to look at teachers like school marms of the 1890s. And we end up spending a lot of money on administration. And frankly, I think teachers are underpaid. And at the end of the day, having observed some things over the years, if I had understood how my wife would be treated in a school system by the administration, I never would have agreed to her taking a position in the Wyoming system of education. Subject to your questions, thank you.
Senator Ruffus.
Mr. Winnie?
Excuse me.
Sorry, I let you get away. Mr. Whitney, in that circumstance, and I think we've talked about it before, one of the concerns you relayed is that decision makers often would not necessarily have as much expertise as that instructional facilitator, your wife in that circumstance, did, and would be effectively evaluating based on maybe a less than full set of circumstances and knowledge. Was that your experience, that perhaps giving that one individual the capacity to terminate without cause would have been even more disconcerting to you?
Well, the specifics that I would relate that I think is directly germane to your question, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, to Senator Rothfuss's question. That particular superintendent, who is now departed and out of state, was overheard by a computer technician working in his office, talking to his business manager, saying that he gets rid of staff and faculty over 40 if he can because they're just too expensive for insurance.
Thank you.
Okay. Me? Anybody else? Yes, sir. And we're going to have time for one or two more.
Jeff Jones, I'm the superintendent at Sheridan School District Number 1. I think the biggest thing that I would ask for your consideration is something that I think would be a significant unintended consequence. This is my 31st year in education, and most of those as an evaluator of teachers, as an administrator. And I am confident in saying that the teachers that are hardest on themselves, that would have the most stress from day to day, would be our very best teachers with something like this. You might think it might light a fire under those who need a fire lit under them. That's not how it works. When you make a comment to the staff about we need to get better on XYZ concept, and you're specifically identifying your weakest teachers in that comment, but you don't say it out loud, I can promise you that the ones that take it to heart and will think about that comment all day long are your very best teachers. I think about the gentleman over here, the second grade teacher. He's probably a fantastic teacher, but he probably is very critical of his craft, which is one of the reasons why he's so good. Those are the people that this is going to potentially harm. And so I'd like for your consideration of that, and I'll stand for questions.
Mr. Chairman. Senator Rothfuss.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Jones, I appreciate those comments, but getting to your current role and kind of along the same lines, when you get pushback or challenge from teachers, kind of in the same vein that the ones that say we need to do more, we need to do better, the kind of people that would be thorns in your side, do they tend to be the ones that are the underperformers or the overperformers?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Rothfuss, the thorns in my side are very often the vocal minority. The outstanding, high-achieving, having high standards of themselves types of people, when they challenge thoughts and ideas, they're not a thorn in my side.
Okay. Anybody else? Thank you very much, sir. We have time for at least one more. Welcome. Proceed.
Green, there we go. Sarah Bieber, Natrona County. I'm not a teacher. I have been a community member involved in education for the last 3 years. I'm a parent, I'm a wife. My parallel comes in as a nurse. You really want very skilled, very talented people in healthcare. We don't have continuing contracts. There are very few nurses and physicians that have continuing contracts. How does the medical field maintain that level of perfection? And we are held to a level of perfection, as we would want in education. It isn't by continuing contracts. It is absolutely 100% possible to maintain a high level of expectation and performance without a continuing contract. It absolutely is. The ones that we are seeing leave now are leaving despite having a continuing contract. It doesn't ensure that they're gonna stay just because they have a continuing contract. The good ones, the not so good ones, the ones that need support, if they don't feel supported and valued, they're going to leave. They're not going to stay here. I don't think that continuing a process that doesn't ensure that is a way to prevent it, because it's not working as it is. We are an at-will and right-to-work state, which matters. Continuing contracts kind of finds a way around that, in my opinion. I think that everybody should have the right to work where they want to or not work. The due process would be really nice in all fields, but very few outside of education have that. A couple other things that I wanted to. It does, in my opinion, force a lot of higher expectation. These teachers have to perform at that high level. They can still be evaluated. Within the bill, there is still a provision for, it's under 21.6.225. The districts, it goes back to the local control. The districts can still establish the length of a contract year. There's a couple other provisions in there that still give them the ability to form contracts and to do what they feel is necessary within their districts as the school board and the superintendents within those districts. So some of that language is still within that. I, again, am in support of this. I'll stand for any questions.
Okay. Senator Ruffus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In your comments, you mentioned that while teachers have continuing contract, other industries, other businesses don't, but then you noted it would be nice if more did. I guess I don't understand that point that you made. I mean, is the reason that you're opposing?
If the government's, sorry, Mr. Chair.
Let me finish the question. If the reason that you're opposing continuing contract is simply because other fields don't benefit from those same advantages, I guess that's a different point that I'd like to understand, and maybe we can do something about getting you continuing contract. If that's really your objective here, let me know.
Mr. Chair, Senator Rothfuss, it's not. I guess to clarify that point, the government wrote stipulation for a continuing contract related to educators and no other field. Why? Why did the government get involved in that aspect of employment and not that aspect of employment for all employment? It was to show the bias. It was just to point out simply that it doesn't have to exist to have that level that we see in all of the other industries that we have in Wyoming that need that expertise, that need those skill levels and that high involvement. Does that make sense?
Thank you for the response, but I don't know that that answers the question about whether it's better or worse. It doesn't seem to justify, all right, well, this is a bad thing. It's just more of a, well, why should they get it if the rest of us don't? And I want to know if that is the underlying argument here, or if there's a specific reason why it's not advantageous to have this, which Mr. Chairman, it seems to me that we've heard some of the discussion and objectives for what it provides, and I wanted to understand from you what specifically about this structure is a negative to the teachers, the state, or our kids.
Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, a negative about this proposed bill?
Mr. Chairman, a negative about continuing contract that would justify the bill.
Okay.
I haven't heard that yet from your testimony.
Okay. I am supporting the bill in the way that the bill is, and continuing contracts, despite having them, we still have all the problems. We have teachers leaving, we have good teachers leaving, we have a perpetuation of teachers that need support that aren't getting that support, that aren't moving forward. We have teachers that should be recognized in evaluation and aren't being recognized. We still have all of those problems despite having a system that isn't working. So why would we perpetuate and continue a system that we have all of those things currently? So I support this bill as taking that out and leaving it more to that teacher has a right to work where she wants or he wants and be evaluated on the basis of merit and performance, because we have really good educators in this state, and that is.
Mr. Chairman, thanks. And I'll agree that we have really good educators in the state.
I'm thinking about understanding the point correctly. What you're saying is that it's working in the profession you know best without continuing contract.
Correct.
And why shouldn't it work for the teachers as well? Is that a correct understanding of your point?
Yes, I know it can be done in my field. I've never had a continuing contract. It can be done. It's definitely possible without being detrimental, because that was some of the testimony that we heard too.
Okay. Other members of the committee? Senator Rothfuss? Okay, thank you very much. We're getting to the point where it's getting too close to time to take up. We'll continue this bill. Maybe the last one on the schedule, but we will hear it on Wednesday. We apologize. Senator Hicks, the sponsor, was sent here, but I think he's other duties shanghaied him, and that no fault of his own. We'll make sure he gets a chance. Okay, thank you all very much. Appreciate everybody, and appreciate everybody. We've dealt with some controversial issues, and everybody would properly behave.